welcome to another episode of Our Own Devices with Nandagopal Rajan. This time we have a big name from the world of tech in India, and that's Mr. Rajan Navani, who is the CEO and founder of JetSynthesys. So, welcome to the show.
Pleasure, Nandagopal. Great to be here with you.
And we are going to be talking about something that's like, again, in the world of tech, you end up with a lot of buzzwords which keep on buzzing. Like, you had cloud for a long time. You have AI, ML, which sort of, is like, become punctuation, every time you talk to anybody in tech. And now we're going to talk about Web 3 or Web 3.0, which is the future. Sir, can I just start by asking you, how do you sort of, define Web 3.0?
So, it's interesting because Web3, as the name suggests, is the third generation of how we would look at, the internet's evolution, yes. Right? So initially, one looked at the internet primarily from a ability to connect to people. Then we had this whole, Google generation where you were getting information, you were able to do two-way kind of interaction, etc. Web3 really is now changing the paradigm where the economy is now being run, through the internet. There's an ability to own assets. There's an ability to, to keep value in the internet, that has drastically changed the value proposition of where the internet is headed. So to me, I think Web 3.0 is probably as large a shift in consumer behavior we will see as what happened with Web 2. And, to my mind, it is really an empty space today for someone to go and, create, assets and really build that universe the way, they believe they can benefit from, that kind of a transition. So I think it will play out on the basis of how people engage with Web3. Web3 is just like an underlying architecture, blockchain-based ability to do things. It's the use cases that will drive, the future of what it can be. And interestingly, if you think about it, the people who use Web 2.0, just to create a website, or someone used it to do e-commerce, and somebody actually used it to create an Uber, where they were able to create livelihoods and everything out of that same consumer internet space, right? So the ability to use a transformation of technology is really up to the users of that technology and the consumers of that technology, right? So I think that to me is the most exciting part about Web3, that what will it unleash will really be dependent on everyone else. And just the fact that you have an economy that is there, that is going to create value for many people of the generation that you and I are not necessarily a part of, who see that differently, is what is exciting. We interact a lot with Gen Zs, and I must tell you that when we talk to Gen Zs here, they say we'll never be able to buy a home with the money that we have, and even if we buy a home, we'll buy a small home, and in that we can keep limited number of assets. We can keep some things, but in the Web3 world, my avatar can own anything. We can have experiences. Yeah. We can do all of that, right? So that thought process is something that the world has to get used to, and I think it's that generation that's going to define really how the world engages with Web3, and that's the exciting part, because India is home to 1 in 10 people in the world under the age of 25, right? So 1 in 10 people in the world is not only an Indian, but is an Indian under the age of 25. So I think India's positioning in the Web3 opportunity is probably, I would like to believe, the most potentially, value accreditation, early point of technology adoption, that we have, unlike any other country.
It's actually a very valid point, because as you mentioned, so I have a 10-year-old at home who's building a skyscraper, like in the virtual world. And somewhere I get the feeling that he might actually value that more than a physical possession. So an interesting aspect that, which you also touched upon in Web3 is that along with the ability to create, you also have the ability to possess or own, and maybe also transfer. right? And along with that, I keep hearing about the decentralized nature of Web3. Could you just talk a little bit about that? How is that going to be a game changer?
I think what has really happened, right? When you look at highly contextual, personalized information, which has started to now percolate, right, over the internet, right? Then the next thing that comes is that who has control on that kind of data, right? Why should there be a centralized ability for someone to control and own that data? Right? Because it's become so much a part of your and my life. And as we talk of the next generation or the Gen Zs, it's like a much larger part of their life, right? So when we started JetSynthesys, it was started with a simple vision of playing a larger role in the daily digital life of people in India, over 1.3 billion, and people in the world. And today, that daily digital life of people has only grown and expanded. So when more of your world is there, right, why should there be centralized access to your data? I think the decentralization or the Web3 emergence really came from there. And really what that truly means is that the blockchain technology that enables decentralization is going to now hit everything, right? It depends, again, as I said, how people adopt it, right? So the creator economy we already seen, right, where people are able to create assets, sell their assets, transfer their assets, own their assets. Those assets actually, which are traded in the virtual world, have the ability to manifest themselves in the real world in different shapes and forms. Now, moment that happens, really what happens to corporations and companies also at a level where, the ownership of a product or a service is again centralized. So what we are seeing happening massively with Web3 is that there is decentralization, or there is a unique opportunity for high performance creators, and that's where it's starting, right? To be able to create value for themselves rather than derive the value out of a structured, centralized organization or institution. And that collective decentralization is really what is going to drive the future of that particular industry. So do you ask me 20 years from today, we will not have these large corporations, that have like 20% market share and 30% market share, and individual really controlling livelihoods and economies of countries? Very much possible, right? It depends on how the adoption of this technology happens, how our policy frameworks, shaped to make that happen. I think many, many things have to happen. Different parts of the world will move differently, as we've seen with so many technologies, right? I mean, every technology is as powerful or can be as destructive at some point, for somebody else, as it can be powerful for someone. And that's the word disruption, right? We've seen large corporations get completely, eliminated because of a disruptive technology, right? And sometimes those disruptive technologies do good things only. But like anything which is powerful, it can create good, it can create bad, and I think all of that will play out. You talked of AI, ML, today the ethics around AI is probably the most debated subject when it comes to, AI. Imagine a machine telling man what to do. Would you want us to be simple, people who operate on the instructions of some machines who are definitely going to be more powerful than what the human is today? But tomorrow, that machine is the, over intuitive, over empowered, human being, right? Will we allow it to go there? I mean, that's the key. So I think it's how the technology will play out that will define, the future of where this goes. But the fact that decentralization is built in there is a very, very powerful attribute, especially to the next generation, which is really looking at the world as a peer group and not really as, one centralized force controlling and owning more of the world than others.
Also, you mentioned a bit about the peculiar place that India is in right now because of our demographic dividend, as we call it. But if you look beyond that, is there something in the Web3, as we see it now? I know it's a little bit of crystal ball gazing, but which makes it uniquely adaptable for an Indian audience, or you think that maybe it might hit a sweet spot when it starts solving some Indian problems?
So no, I think for a country like India, we actually have an opportunity to create a leadership position in this space. And the reason I'm saying that is because, again, as I said, the demography that is going to be impacted and is going to, drive this is very large. And the problems of this demography are also very different, right? And India does have a large number of challenges. Now, there are multiple ways one can look at it. One is if one is looking at forecasts, but $1 trillion, kind of an economy or economic growth potential over the next decade is just out of, Web3 is a very realizable, target, right? Which is nearly 30% of today's GDP for a country like India. 35% can be derived over the next decade, specifically around, just the power of Web3. Now, how does that truly play out? What is it going to take, right? Is going to be defined by the case studies, by the ability for businesses to be able to do this, for disruptors to come in and create opportunities that make it happen, policy, frameworks that will enable that to grow, right? There are many drivers of that, right? That will decide the future. But if you ask me, is this going to really solve a problem, in the real world? Definitely, right? I mean, we see so many things that are already globally moving to blockchain, right? Because the authenticity of a blockchain transaction, right, is as good or as real as, anything else, because, it is on multiple servers. Even if half of the world crashes, the authenticity of your ownership still stays, right? And it is visible and it's the most transparent. Everybody can see the code, and know what it is. So the predictability, the transparency, the ability to identify, where the asset or whatever, however one looks at the technology and whatever use case one is adopting is indeed very powerful, right? So as energy improvisations happen, because yes, there are many negatives to, minting and so many other things, as all of that changes, right, and as we see a lot of other things happening, we will see the true power of this, getting unlocked. And I think globally we are seeing many companies already using, blockchain, and especially, decentralized processes, trying to position themselves as decentralized autonomous organizations, as we call DAOs, right, who are actually, linking phygital products, right, physical and digital products, together, and seeing how that world will shape up. So I think it's very, very interesting times, and the world is actually beginning to discuss this on common platforms. So I'm on the World Economic Forum platform, and the first time the World Economic Forum discussion on metaverse and, Web3 evolution happened just about a month and a half back, and the world came together to discuss on how we can look at this future together. And it was very interesting to see how different, developed economies, developing economies, are looking at this opportunity, and how companies see their role, in this in the future. So it's an opportunity. I think it's a potential, but as I mentioned earlier, it will all play out on how we decide, to take it forward.
Are you also foreseeing a different relationship, because of Web3 between, governments and people? For instance, like, in a country like India, where we already have something like an Aadhaar, which is the base of identity of users, and this sort of plays into a Web3 kind of a world where, like, the government can actually interact directly with literally 1.5 billion or whatever number of people you might have. Do you think it's going to change governance itself on its head?
Absolutely. I think and in a country like India, as I mentioned earlier, where, we have a large class that needs to benefit, we need to be able to classify people in different buckets, in different groups who require different sort of enablement, right, to create, that to reduce the inequality, the disparity. I think it's a massive opportunity, right, for governments to be able to use that. And I must say that even in India, whatever limited interaction that I have, through various platforms like CII and others, and, championing this India at 75 initiative, where we're this week celebrating our Amrit Mahotsav, right? I think the future is going to be built on how we adopt technology for our citizens. I think our economic strength, our ability to take our per capita GDP higher, will all be dependent on many ways in which we use technologies such as blockchain and Web3. So I am very excited about the potential of what government can do, and governments can use technology like this to shape and empower and improve the lives of its citizens, and vice versa. I think how businesses can do the same for their consumers, how celebrities can do that for their fans. We're seeing NFTs and so many other ways in which there is an ability to engage deeper with experiences. The metaverse is going to change the way immersive experiences are felt. So I think all of this is riding on the backbone of Web3, and I think that's going to drastically change our life moving forward. But more importantly than anything else, I think if the government and society can build trust, right, I think there is no better way than a blockchain transparent mechanism to be able to build that. And it builds both, I think, value as well as I think transparency that is going to drive the future of any nation. So if we talk of technological vitality, economic strength, and the moral leadership or character that will come through this transparent process of governance, will really position India on the Amrit Kal, like our Prime Minister likes to say. The next 25 years will take us back to the Sone ki Chiriya that India used to be recognized for the world for. And I think technology, Web3 is going to play a key role in helping shape that future. And I think it's happening globally, right? Many countries are already beginning to adopt that in very, very different ways. And we can go down and spend an hour on the different use cases where governments are using this. And I think there's a lot being written about, but it will take a proactive, an innovative, a policy framework, a relationship with society, that is based on something that is new and emerging, to really unlock the true potential of this. And that has to be a collaborative process. And I think that's really where we are positioning, I think ourselves even as a country today to be able to make ourselves, and grow on that path. So indeed, very interesting times. Let me end with that.
Is there, a decentralized world, if I put it in a different way, it's almost as if every person will have his own version of the internet because you are in a way interacting with it on your own terms, right? But is that going to be a nightmare to sort of police, regulate, to have a policy for?
Not really, because if you see personalization, in a person's world has actually already been triggered through AI, right? I mean, what is AI, right? AI is able to, really derive intelligence and shape your experiences in a manner that gives you greater level of comfort, greater level of ability to perform to your ultimate potential, right? And I think that applies whether it's in a business with efficiencies, whether it's IoT, whether it is sensor based, whether it is the way you consume goods and services. I think AI has already been around for a long time. In our gaming industry, AI has been there for 40 years, right? Whenever you're playing a game and you get better at the game, you compete with someone, the game just becomes more difficult basis how well you're improving, right? So we've seen AI in different levels, which has led to personalization, right? The blockchain actually gives it the authenticity and the transparency, around that, right? So yes, what today is actually being shielded will actually become more open, right? With blockchain, right? When we talk of a decentralized world, where governance is with the majority, everybody knows that there will be 51,000 people who will vote in favor of something out of a group of 100,000, and it gets done, right? And it's so much more transparent as to who's going to drive the future of whatever initiative or whatever piece is there on the blockchain, right? I think if you think of it in that manner, the democratic principles that we talk of or that we live by get fully enforced, when a blockchain kind of a system comes up, right? So to me, it is actually far more empowering, than anything else, right? It is governance will become far easier, if you ask me, if we are able to adopt this technology. I mean, India's already, we've been reading about a digital currency, right? A digital currency, basically movement of value of currency, which today might happen, from my wallet to somebody else's wallet, from somebody else's to somebody else's wallet, which someone is not aware of. If it comes onto a blockchain, it's visible to everyone, not only to government, but to everyone, as to where that the 10 rupee note moved, right, from one person to the other. I'm just giving you an example. Now, imagine we have a cashless society like that. I think it is far more empowering, right? And it creates greater trust, creates far better mechanisms for society to function than the other way around, right? So I think, but technology will come with its own set of challenges. It will require, as I said, therefore, that innovative mindset, right? The ability to listen, the ability to be able to sit together, right, as stakeholders to make this change will lead to far greater stability and understanding of that than anything else. So if you ask me, as I said, it is how we use it, but in my mind, it is a very empowering technology that is driving the future of Web3.
In India, we have this wonderful way of putting to the world that we have been late on something. We say that we leapfrogged something. So in this case, do you think we have the potential of leapfrogging, or do you think we will be an early adopter? And I'm talking primarily from the sense of having a policy in place, understanding the regulations that will be needed for this thing, because we are a country where this data protection bill is still not there, right? And that's something maybe we should have had a decade back, for instance.
Data protection bill, you're absolutely right when it comes to data privacy and many of these things. I think the amount of data, as I said, we are generating, right? It is important for us to have an understanding at a national level as to what does that it mean for each person and everyone. But having said that, assuming we get past that piece, right, and which hopefully is going to happen in the recent future, then I think the other limiting factor that will enable us to adopt this at size and scale is really the way people will engage with Web3, right? And now that is driven by multiple sets of stakeholders. So there are countries in the world, that have, very broadly and openly adopted blockchain and the technology underlying there, even though it represents value and currency. I think the challenge here is because of the power of this technology and the fact that it is driving currency and value, right, is where there is a little bit of confusion globally on how much of this would actually result in the future, right? And we've seen what has happened with cryptocurrencies in recent times and earlier times, because technology, as I mentioned earlier, can be made as powerful, and can be used for as much good as disruptive elements as well, right? I think therefore building a broader framework, right, under which this technology will move is, I think, so important for the future of this technology, right? And it is exactly that same framework, Nandagopal, that ultimately shapes the future of a country. Like for a country like India, if we cannot build inclusivity, we cannot build affordability, we cannot build scale, pockets of excellence are not going to deliver outcomes for us, to the level like it might deliver in a smaller country in the Nordics or somewhere. If we don't have those as the non-negotiables of our journey, right, we will never become those global superpower that we aspire to be, right? So similarly, I think it's more defining these frameworks. What are the non-negotiables within which innovation needs to happen, right? And that will define India. So we may not look very great over the next 2-3 years, but over the next 25 years, we'll definitely be a force to reckon. I think that's the level of, thinking and the ability to be able to, bet on some hypotheses around these technologies, and take a decision that is, more a framework led, with an innovation sandbox. And we're seeing that happening, right? RBI now has an innovation sandbox for fintech where, there's not much of a policy regulation, but we're doing experiments around what could be some of those things that can be scaled and grown. I think a more adaptive approach, a more innovation first led approach to such initiatives will really position ourselves, I think, very well for the future. So I think that's where I see, some of the early success for this coming from.
Thank you, sir, for giving us a deep understanding of Web3. And this is again a topic that's evolving, and we are maybe ahead of the times here when we are talking about it. But it's great to hear the kind of scope and potential we in India have with this new emerging technology. Mr. Navani, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is Nandagopal Rajan signing off. We'll be again available everywhere you listen to your pods.